I never planned to notice her. It just sort of happened, the way you start recognizing a song that plays every morning on the radio. Familiar, then suddenly unavoidable. Most mornings, I stopped at the corner coffee shop before work. Nothing special, just a chipped table near the window, a half-warm cup, and my headphones in, though I rarely played anything. It was easier to pretend I was listening to music than admit I didn't have anyone waiting for a reply on my phone. She came in around the same time, usually after dropping off a bag of mail at the post office across the street. Mid-40s, maybe, but she carried herself like someone who wasn't interested in being measured that way. Hair tied back, always a scarf, like she was stepping out of another season. The first time she spoke to me, it wasn't even about me. She was at the counter, the barista fumbling her order, and she turned slightly, rolling her eyes in this gentle, almost conspiratorial way. Like I was supposed to be in on the joke. I half smiled back, too quickly, then buried my face in my cup. But the next day, she remembered me. "Window seat," she said, walking past. I nodded, embarrassed that she'd noticed something so small. After that, it became, not a routine, but something close. Little acknowledgments. She'd glance at the book I was pretending to read, or I'd catch her scribbling in a notebook, pausing like she didn't want me to see. We never sat together. Just parallel mornings that kept brushing shoulders. It wasn't attraction at first, not the way movies sell it. More like gravity. You feel yourself leaning without meaning to. One morning, the shop was crowded. My usual table was taken. She looked up, saw me hovering, and tilted her head toward the empty chair across from her. "Unless you're waiting for someone," she said. I shook my head. Not likely. Her smile was small, but it stayed. We talked about nothing at first. Coffee that was too bitter. The flickering light above the counter. How the shop playlist hadn't changed in months. She laughed easily, not the kind of laugh that tries too hard, the kind that lands and stays with you after. I noticed little things. The way she wrapped her hands around the mug, even when it was already warm, or how she underlined words in her notebook twice before moving on. I caught myself flicking my eyes toward her hands, then away, like I wasn't supposed to look. At some point, she asked, "So, what's your story?" I shrugged. "I'm just a normal guy." It slipped out too fast, like a defense. Her gaze lingered, steady in a way that made me want to look anywhere else. Then she smiled, soft but certain. "That's what makes you irresistible." I laughed, awkward, not knowing where to put it. I folded the napkin in front of me, then unfolded it again. "You don't mean that." But she didn't correct herself. She just sipped her coffee, as if she'd left something hanging between us on purpose. Later, when she stood to leave, she gathered her scarf slowly, like she was giving me time to say something more. I didn't. I just watched her walk out, the bell above the door chiming once. I thought that was the end of it. Just a moment, nothing more. Then, a few minutes later, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Short message. "You left your book on the table. I'll keep it safe." I hadn't noticed. And just like that, she was already holding a part of me. When I picked up my book from her the next morning, she held it out with a half smile. "You're careless," she said. "Or strategic." I answered before I could stop myself. My voice came out too light, like I was joking with someone I'd known much longer. She tilted her head, studying me as though she wasn't sure if I meant it. Maybe I wasn't sure either. We sat again, not across the room this time, but across from each other, as though yesterday had rearranged the geography of the cafe. She asked about my classes. I asked about her work. She told me she'd been divorced 5 years, that she taught part-time now. Enough to pay the bills, not enough to get too tired. Her tone was matter-of-fact, but her fingers drummed on her cup when she said it. I nodded, not knowing what to say. My parents were still together, though barely speaking most days. I thought of their silences at dinner, how loud they felt. I almost told her that, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "You make teaching sound survivable." That made her laugh, a low sound that seemed to surprise even her. The talk drifted. Music, neighbors, a film she said she'd fallen asleep halfway through. Normal things. But beneath it, Something else kept tugging, an awareness neither of us named. It felt strange, noticing how her eyes crinkled when she smiled, or the way she smoothed her scarf as if it mattered what I thought. She wasn't supposed to care. I wasn't supposed to notice. And yet I did. Halfway through, she leaned forward. "Can I tell you something?" "Of course." She hesitated, then said, "Sometimes I sit here just so I don't go home too quickly. The house feels large when no one's waiting inside." The words sat between us, heavier than the clatter of cups or the hiss of the espresso machine. I didn't know what to do with them. I wanted to say something that mattered, but all I managed was, "Yeah, I know that feeling." And I did. Even in my 20s, nights could stretch too wide. I'd stare at half-written texts, unsent. It was easier to pretend I didn't want to send them than admit no one was waiting. For a moment, we just sat in silence. Not uncomfortable, but full. She broke it with a smile, as if pulling us back to safer ground. "You're too young to know what I mean." "I don't think that's true." Our eyes held for longer than they should have. When she finally stood to leave, she reached across the table to slide my book toward me, fingertips brushing mine for the briefest moment. It was nothing, really, just a gesture, practical. But I felt it long after she walked out, scarf trailing, the bell above the door chiming once. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. The next week, everything felt slightly different. Not said out loud, but carried in the way we looked at each other when we sat down. Like something had shifted in the room, though no one else could feel it. She was already there when I walked in, notebook open, a half-finished tea cooling in front of her. She looked up, gave the smallest nod. Not quite an invitation, not quite casual. I took the seat across anyway. We didn't talk at first. Just the clink of spoons, the scrape of chairs around us. I noticed her hand resting near the edge of the table, close enough that if I leaned forward just a little, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Long day?" Her smile flickered, quick. "Always." She closed her notebook, slid it aside like it had revealed too much. We talked in fragments. I mentioned a professor who kept mixing up my name. She told me about a neighbor who played piano badly, but with too much confidence. The conversation felt like a rope, both of us tugging it closer, then letting it slip again. Halfway through, someone I knew from class walked in. He spotted me instantly, gave a wave, too loud, too familiar. I saw her pull back. Not in a dramatic way. Just the way her posture straightened, her hand retreating from the table, scarf adjusted. Invisible distance, drawn quick and sharp. I waved at my friend, mouthed later, then turned back to her. But the rhythm had broken. "You don't have to explain," she said softly. I wasn't going to. Her eyes met mine, searching, then dropped to her tea. She stirred it though the sugar had already dissolved. We sat in silence. A heavy one this time. Finally, she exhaled, quiet. "I'm not sure what you want from this." The words pressed hard against me. I opened my mouth, then closed it. What did I want? A friend? A distraction? Or the impossible thing I couldn't even say out loud? I shrugged, but too slowly. "I don't know. I just don't want to stop sitting here." She looked at me then, long enough that I felt myself holding my breath. Her eyes softened, but she shook her head slightly, as if warning herself, not me. When she finally stood, gathering her things, she hesitated, leaned closer across the table, her scarf brushing the edge of my book. For 1 second, her face was near mine, near enough that if either of us moved an inch, everything would change. But she didn't move. Neither did I. Instead, she pressed her hand lightly against my arm, fingers warm through the sleeve of my jacket. Just a touch, just long enough to feel it couldn't have been accidental. Then she walked out. The bell above the door chimed once. And I sat there, heart unsteady, knowing I'd almost stepped off the edge. It wasn't planned, the walk. We left the cafe at the same time, and she fell into step beside me. The air was cooler than usual, leaves skittering across the sidewalk. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets. She adjusted her scarf. Neither of us mentioned going the same way. A block later, she slowed. "You always walk this direction?" Most days, I said. It's quieter. We ended up at the small park near the post office. A few benches, a swing set with peeling paint, the faint sound of traffic far enough to blur into background. She sat, smoothing her skirt as if buying time. I sat too, but not too close. For a while, we just watched a stray dog nose around the grass. Her hand rested on the bench between us. Close again. Always close. She spoke first. I shouldn't keep meeting you like this. The words hit harder than I expected. I tried to laugh it off. We're just having coffee. Are we? Her voice was soft. Too soft. I looked at her then. Really looked. The faint lines at her eyes, the kind that come from both laughter and worry. The way she kept her shoulders drawn tight, like she was bracing for something. I don't know what this is, I admitted. The truth tasted raw. But I don't want to stop. Her breath caught, almost imperceptible. She looked away, toward the swings creaking in the breeze. You're too young to. She stopped herself. I cut in, maybe too quickly. Don't. Her eyes flicked back to mine, searching. There was a beat of silence. Then another. You think I don't notice? She said finally. The way you look at me. The way I. She trailed off, shook her head. I should know better. The words hung there, unfinished. My chest tightened. I'm not asking you to know better, I said, quieter than I meant. She laughed once, dry, without humor. That's the problem. The dog barked somewhere across the park. A car honked faintly in the distance. Everything ordinary, but the space between us felt sharp. I wanted to say more, that I thought about her when I shouldn't, that I saved her texts, read them twice, 3 times. That I wasn't careless with my book. Maybe I'd left it behind for her on purpose. Instead, I just sat there, the words stuck in my throat. She turned slightly toward me, her hand shifting, brushing the bench slap between us. Not touching. Not quite. Tell me, she said, barely above a whisper. If I let this go on, what are you really after? I opened my mouth. Stopped. The question stayed there, lodged in the night air. And I couldn't tell if she wanted the answer, or if she was begging me not to say it. The next morning, she wasn't there. Her scarf wasn't draped over the chair by the window. No notebook half open. No tea cooling untouched. Just absence. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe she had an appointment. Maybe she overslept. But when the next morning came, and the one after that, the empty space by the window started to feel permanent. I still ordered my coffee. Still sat where I usually did. But without her across the table, the cup felt heavier, the silence louder. On the 4th morning, I caught myself pulling out my phone, scrolling to her number. I typed, "Everything okay?" My thumb hovered. Then I locked the screen and slid it back into my pocket. That evening, as I was heading home, I saw her across the street. Not in the cafe, outside the grocery store, a bag of apples tucked under one arm. She was with someone. A girl, maybe 19, maybe 20. Their resemblance was too sharp to miss. Her daughter. They laughed at something small, the kind of laugh that didn't belong to me. For a second, she looked across the street, and our eyes almost met. Almost. She adjusted her bag, touched the girl's arm, and walked away without a flicker of recognition. That night, I couldn't shake the image. Her face turned deliberately elsewhere. The gap between who she was with me and who she was in her real life. The next morning, I didn't go to the cafe. Or the next. It felt wrong to sit there without her, like playing a song too loudly in an empty room. But avoidance didn't soften anything. It sharpened it. The more I stayed away, the more I thought of her. The tea stirred too long. The way she underlined words twice. The brush of her hand on my arm. Finally, on the 5th night, I opened my phone again. Typed, "I miss sitting across from you." Stared at it until the screen dimmed. Deleted it. Typed, "I saw you the other day." Deleted that too. What I wanted to say, what I couldn't say, stayed trapped between drafts and erasures. Instead, I closed the phone, set it face down on the table, and stared at the dark window. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. The chair across from me stayed empty, and I couldn't decide if that was her choice or mine. It happened on a Tuesday evening, a week after I'd stopped showing up at the cafe. I was walking up the narrow stairs to my apartment, the one above her garage, when I heard the sound of a kettle whistling through her kitchen window. Light spilled onto the driveway. I paused, then kept walking, but before I reached my door, hers opened. "You've been avoiding me," she said. I froze on the landing, one foot still on the step. "Or maybe you've been avoiding me." Her scarf was draped around her shoulders, her hair loose for once. She looked tired, not in the way of a long day, but in the way of carrying too much. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she stepped aside. "Come in, if you want." The kitchen smelled faintly of chamomile. She poured tea into 2 chipped mugs without asking, slid one toward me across the counter. I wrapped my hands around it, though it was too hot to drink. We didn't speak for a long while. Just the tick of the old clock on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator. Finally, she said, "That girl you saw with me. My daughter. She's visiting for the semester." I nodded, not sure if I was supposed to respond. "She doesn't know," she added. "About us." "Us," I repeated. The word felt heavier than I'd expected. She pressed her palms flat against the counter. "Whatever this is, I don't even know what to call it." I stared at the steam rising from my mug. My throat felt tight. "You don't have to call it anything. I didn't want it to end before it started." Her shoulders sagged. She looked at me like she wanted to argue, but couldn't. "You're 20. I'm twice that. You should want more than this." I shook my head. "I don't want more. I just want you. Sitting across from me. Talking about nothing." Her breath hitched, barely audible. She gripped the counter harder. "I don't know if I can be that for you," she whispered. The room went very still. My chest ached, like I'd already lost something. I set my mug down, reached across the counter, and covered her hand with mine. Her fingers were cool, tense under my touch, but she didn't pull away. We stayed like that, in the quiet, hands pressed together. Finally, she looked up, meeting my eyes fully. The fear was still there, but so was something else. Relief, maybe. Or surrender. She exhaled. "Okay. Just that." Soft, almost inaudible. But it was enough. Time didn't leap forward. It didn't rush. It settled. The mornings found their rhythm again. Not every day, but often enough that the cafe at 8:47 a.m. became ours in a way no one else noticed. She still ordered tea, stirred it longer than necessary. I stuck to black coffee, pretending not to watch her underline words in her notebook, pretending not to notice her glancing at me over the rim of her cup. We didn't sit pressed together. We didn't need to. The space between us felt different now, not charged, but steady, like silence had finally stopped being something to fear. Sometimes we walked afterward, back to the park bench where she'd once asked me what I was after. We didn't revisit the question. We just sat, listening to the swing creak, the dog bark, the leaves scrape across the pavement. Ordinary sounds, made easier by not being alone in them. Her daughter came by the cafe once, waved as she passed. My stomach knotted, but when I looked at her, she gave me the smallest smile. Not reassurance, exactly. More like a reminder. This is real life. Complicated, messy, but still yours if you choose it. And we did choose it. Not with declarations or promises, but with repetition. Showing up. Small things. She left a thermos by my door on the mornings she knew I'd oversleep. I fixed the loose latch on her gate without being asked. We fell into each other's routines like stepping into shoes already worn in. One evening, I sat in her kitchen again, tea cooling in front of me. The clock ticked like it always did, uneven but dependable. She leaned against the counter, hair tied back, scarf draped loosely. "You're still just a normal guy," she said, almost teasing. I folded the napkin on the table, looked up at her. "Yeah, I guess I am." Her smile was quiet, knowing. The same one from the beginning. The moment didn't need more. No grand confession, no dramatic kiss. Just 2 people, finally at ease with the fact that they fit where they were. And I realized then that love, at least for us, wasn't in the risk or the waiting. It was in the pauses that used to scare us. She reached over, touched my hand lightly. the way she always did when words weren't enough. I looked at her and understood we'd never need to finish the sentence. What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?